Mallory smoothed out her floral dress as she stepped off the train at Lime Street Station. The air was crisp, smelling faintly of salt and diesel, exactly how she'd imagined a northern English city would feel. Beside her, Grant was struggling with two oversized suitcases, his face flushed with the effort of navigating the narrow platform. "Grant, look, it's exactly like that show we watched," Mallory whispered, her eyes wide with excitement. "The brickwork, the signs, it's so charming. Everything feels so historical and cozy." Grant grunted, finally hauling the bags toward the taxi queue. "It's charming until you have to carry 40 pounds of your vacation wardrobe up a flight of stairs, Mal. But yeah, it's definitely got a vibe." They reached the front of the line where a black cab sat idling. The driver, a man named Des with a flat cap and a face that looked like it was carved from a very sarcastic piece of oak, hopped out to help with the bags. He looked at Grant's massive suitcases, then at Grant's slightly sweat-dampened forehead, and let out a short, sharp whistle. Des looked at the luggage and said, "Bloody hell, mate. You moving in permanently, or did you just bring the entire state of Ohio with you in these?" Grant laughed, a bit nervously. Ha, no. Just 2 weeks' worth of gear. My wife likes to be prepared for every type of weather." Des didn't smile back. Instead, he swung the heaviest bag into the boot with a grunt. "Prepared? You've got enough in here to survive a nuclear winter and a royal wedding in the same afternoon. I've seen smaller crates being used to ship grand pianos." Mallory giggled, thinking it was just colorful local talk. "We're just so happy to be here. We've been planning this for a year. We're staying near the docks." Des climbed into the driver's seat and looked at them through the rearview mirror as they buckled in. "The docks, eh? Lovely. Plenty of water there if you decide to jump in after carrying those bags up to a third-floor walk-up. Your husband looks like he's about to have a structural failure as it is." Grant's smile faltered slightly. I'm actually in pretty good shape. I hit the gym 3 times a week back home." Des pulled the cab out into traffic, weaving through the narrow streets with practiced aggression. "The gym? Is that what they call the buffet line in America? Whoa, only joking. But seriously, looking at the size of you, I'd have thought you'd be able to lift a suitcase without turning the color of a ripe tomato." The silence in the back of the cab was sudden and heavy. Mallory felt a sharp, cold sting in her chest. Back in Connecticut, you'd never dream of telling a stranger they looked like they were failing physically, especially not a paying customer. It felt personal. It felt mean. Grant cleared his throat, his voice a pitch higher than usual. "Wow. Okay, I guess the service here is a little more honest than we're used to." Mallory looked out the window, the charming brick buildings suddenly looking a little colder. "I thought people here were supposed to be polite," she whispered to Grant. "Maybe he's just having a bad day," Grant suggested, though he looked genuinely deflated, pulling at his shirt collar. Des noticed the silence and chimed in again. "Quiet back there, isn't it? Don't tell me you're sensitive. I thought Americans were all big and loud. You're melting quicker than a Mr. Whippy in July." Mallory bit her lip. This wasn't the cozy welcome she had seen on TV. It felt like they had walked into a room and immediately been targeted. She wondered if they had done something wrong, or if this was just what life was like across the pond. A series of small verbal stabs disguised as conversation. It was the first sting of the trip, and it left her wondering if they'd make it through the week without being insulted into a state of total silence. After checking into their rental, which did, in fact, involve Grant hauling the grand piano suitcases up 3 flights of stairs, the couple retreated to a small, crowded cafe nearby to recover. Mallory clutched her tea like a shield, her mind still replaying the cab driver's comments about Grant's fitness and their luggage. Mallory leaned across the small wooden table and whispered, "Grant, was that man actually being a jerk? Or is that just how they talk here?" Grant poked at a pastry, looking thoughtful. "I don't know, Mal. Back home, if a service worker called me a ripe tomato, I'd probably be calling his manager. But here, he said it with this weird, twinkle in his eye, like he expected me to say something back." "Say what back?" Mallory asked, genuinely confused. "That his cab smelled like old tobacco and his hat was crooked? That feels so mean. I don't want to be mean." As they sat there, they began to notice a pattern in the conversations around them. It was as if every interaction was a subtle linguistic combat. At the counter, a young woman was ordering a coffee. Local girl. Can I get an oat latte, please? And try not to burn the milk this time, yeah? I know it's a struggle for you. Barista. Listen, if you want a miracle, go to the cathedral down the road. For you, it's lucky I'm even putting the lid on properly. They both laughed. Not a polite customer service laugh, but a genuine shared moment of connection. Mallory watched, mesmerized. In America, that barista would be fired, and that girl would be writing a scathing one-star review about unprofessionalism. Here, it seemed to be the primary currency of friendship. It's a vibe check, Grant realized, leaning back. Seriously, they aren't looking for a thank you or a have a nice day. They're looking for a crack in the armor. It's like a vocabulary of the sting. If you can take the hit and keep standing, you're in. But the words they use, Mallory huffed. He called you a structural failure. That's not a greeting, Grant. That's a medical diagnosis. I feel like I'm walking through a minefield where the mines are just insults about my shoes or my accent. Grant nodded, watching a group of guys at the next table. One of them had just arrived wearing a somewhat bright yellow jacket. Friend 1. Whoa, look at this. The sun's come out early, has it? Or did you just lose a bet with a highlighter pen? Friend 2. Shut it, you. At least people can see me. I walked past you earlier and thought you were a pile of laundry that had gained sentience. Mallory realized that for Americans, conversation was about building a bridge of polite encouragement. You tell someone you like their shirt to make them feel good. In this environment, they seemed to use affectionate depreciation to test the strength of the bond. To these people, being nice was suspicious. It was a surface-level performance. But being mean, that was authentic. That was raw. Wait, Mallory said, her eyes widening. So when Des called our bags crates for grand pianos, he wasn't complaining about the weight. He was trying to play with us. Grant sighed, rubbing his neck. I think so. But the problem is, we don't know the rules of the game. We're playing checkers, and they're playing full-contact rugby with words. Every time I think I'm being friendly, I'm probably just coming across as boring or, worse, fake. They watched as the barista handed the girl her latte with a wink. The girl took it, told him his haircut was an architectural disaster, and walked out smiling. It's a linguistic maze, Mallory whispered, and I think we're the only ones without a map. By Friday evening, Mallory and Grant felt they had a tenuous grasp on the city. They decided to head to a local pub, not a tourist trap, but a real local tucked away in a cobblestone alley, hoping to finally blend in. The moment they pushed through the heavy oak doors, the smell of malt and damp wool hit them. It was crowded, loud, and felt intensely private. "Oh, look who it is!" A booming voice echoed from the corner. It was Des, the cab driver, sitting with a pint and a stout man in a neon work vest. Des grinned, though it looked more like a challenge than a welcome. The grand piano movers. I see the husband hasn't collapsed from exhaustion yet. Surprising that. I had money on you being in traction by Tuesday. Grant laughed, trying to play along. Haha, still standing, Des. This is my wife, Mallory. Des gestured to the man beside him. This is Baz. Baz, these are the Americans who brought enough luggage to start their own colony. Baz looked Grant up and down, then looked at Mallory's pristine white sneakers. Right. You looking for the Marriott, love? Or did you just get lost on your way to a tennis match? Mallory felt her face heat up. Oh no, we just wanted a local experience. We love the atmosphere here. The atmosphere? Baz snorted. It's mostly dust and regret, but suit yourself. What are you drinking? Let me guess. A light beer with a slice of lime and a tiny umbrella? Grant stepped forward, trying to be one of the guys. He leaned on the bar and said, Actually, I'll take whatever you're having. I can handle the strong stuff. Des raised an eyebrow. Is that right? Baz is drinking battery acid and old grudges. You sure your delicate American constitution can handle a real ale? I wouldn't want to have to carry you home. My back's already gone from lifting your wife's wardrobe. The table erupted in laughter. To Mallory, it didn't sound friendly. It sounded like a firing squad. She watched as Grant took a sip of a dark, room-temperature bitter and visibly winced. "Whoa," Grant coughed. That's got some kick." "Kick?" Baz laughed, slapping the table. "It's got a personality, unlike that shirt you're wearing. Did you buy that at a boring dad's convention, or did it come free with a lawnmower?" Mallory tried to jump in, thinking she understood the Bants now. She looked at Baz and said, "Well, at least his shirt isn't neon orange like yours. You look like a giant orange." The laughter stopped. Dead. Baz blinked. Des took a slow sip of his drink. The silence stretched until it felt like a physical weight. Mallory felt the blood drain from her face. Wait, did I go too far? Was that too mean? Des finally broke the silence, but not with a joke. Right. Feisty, isn't she? A bit sharp for a Friday night, Baz. Maybe she's just cranky because she spent 3 days trying to find a decent cup of filtered coffee. The conversation moved on, but Mallory and Grant were no longer part of it. They were the Americans again, the outsiders who didn't know the rhythm. Every time the locals laughed at a joke about Grant's pasty legs or Mallory's enthusiastic nodding, it felt less like a game and more like a systematic dismantling of their confidence. Mallory leaned into Grant, whispering, "I want to go. This feels like being bullied in middle school, but with better beer." "I know," Grant muttered, looking down at his drink. "I thought we were getting it, but I just feel like a punchline. Why is everyone so aggressive?" As they finished their drinks in awkward silence, the roar of laughter from the other tables felt like a wall they couldn't climb. To the Brits, it was just a Friday night. To Mallory and Grant, it was a confusing, painful reminder that being in on the joke required a code they simply didn't possess. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a total social breakdown. The next morning, Mallory and Grant sat on a damp park bench, staring dejectedly at a flock of pigeons. The pub incident hung over them like a London fog. Mallory kept replaying the moment she called Baz a giant orange and the soul-crushing silence that followed. "I think I'm ready to go home, Grant," Mallory sighed, pulling her coat tighter. "I feel like a bully when I try to play their game, and I feel like a victim when I don't. Is everyone here just mean?" "I don't know, Mal. Maybe we just aren't cool enough for England," Grant muttered, looking at his shoes. "Nonsense. You're both lovely. You're just speaking the wrong dialect of English." They jumped. Sitting on the other end of the bench was Siobhan, a woman they'd met briefly at the museum the day before. She had bright purple hair and a nose ring that caught the morning light. She had clearly overheard their existential crisis. Siobhan shifted closer, a sympathetic smirk on her face. "I saw you lot at the pub last night. You looked like 2 golden retrievers dropped into a wolf enclosure. It was painful to watch, honestly." "Wait. So it was as bad as it felt?" Mallory asked, her voice small. Siobhan laughed. "Oh, it was a car crash. But not for the reasons you think. You see, in America, you're raised on radical positivity. You tell people they're doing a great job even when they're failing. You shield the ego. Here, we consider that a bit, well, fake. We think if you're being nice to someone, it's because you don't know them well enough to be honest. Or worse, you actually hate them." Grant frowned. "So, when Des called me a ripe tomato and said I had a boring dad shirt, that was him being honest?" "No," Siobhan corrected, leaning in. "That was him inviting you into his circle. Banter, or Bants, is a test of resilience. If I insult your shirt and you laugh, you're telling me your ego isn't so fragile that a joke will break it. It's a way of saying, I trust you enough to be a bit of a jerk, and I know you won't take it personally. It's the ultimate sign of intimacy." Mallory blinked. "So, when Baz went quiet after I called him an orange, was I too mean?" "Ha ha, no. That's the funny part," Siobhan grinned. "You weren't too mean. You were too logical. You pointed out a literal fact. His vest is orange. Banter has to be absurd. It's a dance. You don't attack the person. You attack the vibe. You don't call him an orange. You ask him if he's moonlighting as a traffic cone. You see the difference? One is a judgment. The other is a play." Grant rubbed his forehead. "So, the meaner they are, the more they actually like us?" Exactly, Siobhan said. If Des started being polite and calling you sir and asking about your flight in a professional tone, that is when you should worry. That means he's bored of you. But as long as he's calling you a structural failure, you're practically family. You have to realize that for us, niceness is a wall. Bants is a bridge. We strip the ego away so we can actually be friends without all the American performance. Mallory looked at Grant. The weight in her chest started to lift, replaced by a dizzying sense of realization. All those stings hadn't been arrows meant to wound. They were invitations to a club she hadn't realized she was auditioning for. Whoa, Mallory whispered. So, the goal isn't to be polite. The goal is to be resiliently ridiculous? Spot on, Siobhan winked, standing up to leave. Next time Des has a go at you, don't explain yourself. Just tell him his taxi smells like a wet dog's retirement home and ask if he's ever considered a career in silence. He'll probably buy you a pint. Grant watched Siobhan walk away, a mischievous glint finally returning to his eyes. I think I'm starting to get the code, Mal. It's not about being mean. It's about proving you can't be bothered by it. Mallory and Grant spent the afternoon practicing. It felt absurd, two adults sitting in a park trying to think of creative ways to insult a cab driver. But as they talked, Mallory realized something profound. In America, her entire social identity was built on being the nice girl. She spent so much energy maintaining a perfect, polite exterior that she realized she was often exhausted by her own performance. If I let go of being perfect, Mallory mused, then it doesn't matter if someone calls my shoes ugly. It's just noise. It's actually kind of freeing, isn't it? Grant nodded, a grin spreading across his face. It's an ego death, Mal. They aren't attacking us. They're attacking the version of us we present to the world. If we stop taking ourselves so seriously, they can't actually hurt us. The true test came that evening. They had called Des again to take them to a restaurant across town. As the familiar black cab pulled up to the curb, Mallory felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the pivot. Des rolled down the window, leaning out with that same sardonic smirk. Oh, look at this. The survivors have returned. I thought for sure you'd have checked into a spa to recover from the trauma of a Friday night pub crawl. You look slightly less like a deer in headlights today, Grant. Did your wife finally give you an extra scoop of mashed potatoes for bravery? Grant didn't flinch. He didn't offer a polite, nervous laugh. Instead, he tossed his bag into the back and looked Des straight in the eye. Grant. Listen, Des, I'd answer that, but I'm too busy wondering if this cab actually has an engine, or if you've just got a very tired hamster running in a wheel under the hood. I've seen glaciers move faster than this rust bucket. Des froze. His eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared under his flat cap. A heavy silence filled the street. Mallory held her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. Wait, did he go too far? Then slowly, a massive, genuine grin broke across Des's face. He let out a loud, barking laugh and slapped the steering wheel. Des. Haha. A hamster? That's rich coming from a man who looks like he'd get winded opening a bag of crisps. Get in the car, you absolute muppet. I'll show you speed, assuming your heart can take the excitement. As they pulled away, the energy in the cab was completely different. The wall of politeness had crumbled, and in its place was a weird, buzzing electricity. Mallory realized she wasn't offended anymore. She felt seen. Mallory leaned forward. And Des? About that hat. Did you find it in a skip, or does it double as a birdhouse when you're not working? Des roared with laughter, swerving slightly as he navigated a turn. Whoa! She's got teeth, this one. Watch out, Grant, she'll be running the country by Tuesday and you'll be relegated to folding her socks. Seriously, you lot aren't as boring as you look. For the rest of the ride, the mean comments flew back and forth like a tennis match. It wasn't bullying. It was a celebration. By stripping away the need to be nice, they had found a shortcut to genuine connection. They weren't the Americans anymore. They were just three people in a car, having a laugh at each other's expense. Mallory realized that American niceness was like a padded room, safe, but isolating. British Bants was a playground, rough, but full of life. As she climbed out of the cab at the restaurant, Des gave them a genuine nod. Des. See you tomorrow, you pair of lunatics. And Grant, wear a different shirt. That one makes me feel like I'm looking at a spreadsheet. Will do, Des, Grant laughed. Try to find the accelerator pedal on the way home, yeah? They stood on the sidewalk, watching the cab disappear. They had finally dished it back, and for the first time since landing, they felt like they truly belonged. As the sun began to set over the Mersey, casting a long amber glow across the docks, Mallory and Grant sat in a quiet corner of a cafe, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past few days. The transition from feeling targeted to feeling embraced had been jarring, but it brought a startling clarity to how they viewed the world. Mallory stirred her tea, watching the steam rise. You know, Grant, I used to think being nice was the universal language. I thought if you were polite and complimentary, everyone would understand you were a good person. But here, I realized that nice can actually be a very lonely place to live. Grant nodded, leaning back and watching a group of locals laughing uproariously at a nearby table. Seriously, back home we spend so much time protecting each other's feelings that we never really get to the raw stuff. We're so afraid of being mean that we end up being distant. But these guys, they use mean as a shortcut to trust. If I can insult your most prized possession and you can laugh about it, we've just proven that nothing can come between us. It's like a high-stakes safety test. It was a philosophical shift. They had moved from a low-context culture where words mean exactly what they say to a high-context environment where the meaning is found in the subtext, the wink, and the shared history of the roast. The Bants wasn't about the words themselves. It was about the space between the words. It was a signal that the social environment was safe enough to be dangerous. It's a global lesson in context, Mallory mused. We went from thinking Bants is just being mean to realizing that Bants is actually being vulnerable. But you have to be vulnerable to let someone mock you. You have to be secure to mock them back. As they prepared to head to the airport the next morning, they didn't feel like tourists anymore. They felt like they had been initiated into a secret society where the entry fee was a thick skin and a quick wit. They realized that while Americans signal safety through polite encouragement, the British signal it through resilient irony. Neither is wrong, but understanding the difference is the key to truly belonging anywhere in the world. Mallory looked at her husband and smiled. Whoa, I think I'm actually going to miss being called a muppet by a stranger. Grant laughed, pulling their suitcases toward the door. Maybe just don't try it on the TSA agents back in Newark, Mal. I don't think they've read the same script we have. They walked out into the crisp morning air, two Americans who had lost their polite armor and found something much more durable underneath, a sense of humor that didn't need a filter.